Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another episode of Climbing the Tactics Training Ladder. It's been a couple weeks since I've solved any tactics. I was away at that chess camp, and I'm giving a lecture here in Minneapolis in about an hour and a half, so I want to be sharp, and the quickest way to sharpen up your thought process in chess, do some tactics. So that's what I'm going to do right now. As you can see, we've solved 146 problems, 143 of them correctly. So let's try to keep our stats going, solving for accuracy always. So white to move here. Okay, so this queen is stopping us from playing e7 check. I would love to get that move in. I'm thinking about rook takes f8 because it is a forcing move. I'm also thinking about rook f7, although rook f7, can black just play queen takes e6? Maybe I can double my rooks in that case. There's also this undefended rook here over on b6 that catches my eye. But rook takes f8 and rook f7 are the prime candidate moves right now. So rook f7... You know, there's also even bishop takes e6 after rook takes f7, so I'm liking that move less. Yeah, bishop takes e6 seems to be a neat solution. Rook takes f8 on the other hand. If queen takes, that works great. e7 check and we win, but king takes, rook f1 check. Let's say king to e8 even. Rook f7, queen takes e6, and I'm not seeing the follow-up. So maybe rook takes f8 is not working. Really might have something to do with this rook, though. Undefended piece. Also, my bishop on g2, I would like to get involved. I'm looking at e5, trying to get in some work on this diagonal. I don't think it makes sense to play it right away, but it is a candidate move, candidate idea. What if I just double up the rooks? I mean, not forcing, but rook a to f1, is there anything wrong with that? Attacking f8. How can black really counter that? There's no piece that can help out to defend this bishop. So, rook a f1, what does black do? Yeah, that's probably it. I am going to play that move. Black plays h5. Okay, so do we cash in right away or do we play rook f7? Rook f7, there's still that bishop takes e6 move, so I think cash in right away. And if they take with the queen, I was going to play e7 check. But the problem continues here. Okay, so do we just scoop up the bishop? Rook takes c8. Unless there's checkmate or an even greater win of material, I think rook takes c8. Yeah, we're up an entire rook after that, aren't we? Okay, so problem solved. Only got 1 point, but the move that I eventually settled on was not in my first couple candidate moves. We looked at rook takes f8 and also rook f7. Those were the more tempting moves in my eyes. But it happened to be this slower move, rook a f1, just attacking the bishop on f8, which has no convenient way to be defended by black. The queen and the king are tied to the defense, and black's so cramped, no other piece can help out. If the rook was back on b8, maybe black could play bishop b7 or something, bishop a6 to have the rook come over, but yeah, just this slower move is working. Okay, so I didn't get this as fast as I would like, but I'm still satisfied with my thought process. And again, the rook f7 move was not working because of, I think, bishop takes e6 probably being the best solution. Because I think a lot of you out there will agree with me that the first thing that catches your eye about this position is the fact that black's queen is blockading the e-pawn. And if we can destroy that blockade and be able to play e7 check, then black's position is going to collapse real quick. So, I mean, rook f7 makes some sense trying to dislodge the queen. You know, hoping for something like, I don't know, queen d8, e7, but black can just pick off the pawn instead. Bishop takes e6, rook takes e7, bishop takes b3. Black should be fine. Okay, so white is severely underdeveloped. Clearly we have an attack. Since the queen and the knight are lurking around white's king, we're looking at smothered mate ideas. But knight f2 right away, I guess white just takes, let's say with the queen. Queen takes f2. Rook d1, queen takes c5, rook takes e1, queen back to g1. That's not going to cut it. What about queen e5, hitting the knight and also threatening mate on h2? That's a nice little double attack. White cannot play knight f3 to cover both, so that might be decisive. At least winning material or mating. Yeah, how does he avoid the mate? I like this move. Yeah, take it. Is there anything else? If takes king g2, what do we have planned next? Rook d1 maybe? Looks pretty good. no other moves to really think about here. So yeah, let's play this one. And problem solved. That last dilemma, what to play in this position, this can mess with you when you're solving a tactics training problem because, I mean, I know queen takes e1 is the natural continuation, but I want to have my next move in mind after king g2, but the problem just happened to end after queen takes e1, so there was nothing even more to calculate. So I think in this case it is okay to play queen takes e1 relatively quickly if you don't identify any other move that makes any sense. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. I always encourage you guys to see the entirety of the solution in your head before you make the first move, but there are small exceptions like this. So classic double attack right here, folks. Queen e5. Hit the knight on e1, threaten mate on h2. The queen and the knight around the opponent's king is a huge trigger. That should conjure up a lot of tactical ideas. That's a powerful attacking force, those two pieces. I've mentioned this before, but a queen and a knight complement each other very well because they don't reproduce the same squares when they're attacking together. They help each other out. They control lots of territory, create many threats. Whereas a queen and a bishop will always overlap to some degree because a bishop and a queen, they both move on diagonals. Whereas a queen and the knight, they move different ways. Next problem. Okay, so white's down material. Knight takes d5, check, king a5. First line we look at, but is there a follow-up? Definitely we're looking at possibilities with the knight, trying to land forks and such. What about a5 check? That's another forcing move. King takes a5, knight c6, just luring the king into a fork. I would assume that's just winning. So a5, black would have to play king to b7. But then that queen is looking awfully trapped. Knight to c6, black has to play queen back to a8. Queen to a8. And what then? Maybe knight e7? Or, ooh, that's really cool. King g7, taking away the f8 and the h8 squares. And black is in zugzwang. Has to give up their queen. a5 check, king b7, knight c6, queen a8 forced. King g7, taking away f8 and h8. Lovely. And the bishop and the knight control all the other squares. And the king handles f8 and g8, I should say, and h8. So those three squares. I like it. Let's do it. So the second move is not a forcing move, nor is the third move, king g7. But clearly we want to take away squares from the queen. And king g7 was the only way to guard all three of those squares. Okay, here I think we'll just take this guy. And problem solved for 6 points. Nice one. So with this limited amount of material and white being down material, it probably has something to do with winning the queen or getting black in a mating net. So knight takes d5 was one move I analyzed right off the bat. Take the pawn with check. But after king a5, there doesn't appear to be a good follow-up. Unless I could land my knight on c6 quickly and get a fork. But that's not going to happen. So what do we look at then? The other forcing move, a5 check. After a5 check, king takes a5, knight c6. That does the job. White will just win this endgame with the two pawns and the bishop. So king b7 is forced. And now, again, we're trying to corral that queen. Bishop c6 isn't leading anywhere after, say, king to c8. So knight c6 caught my eye because it attacks the queen and also defends d4. Black was threatening queen takes d4 check. Got to play to a8. And now we just use reciprocal thinking. I've talked about this technique before, thinking backwards. So ask yourself, what is your opponent trying to do? And with queen a8, black is trying to escape with their queen to the king side. So going to f8, g8, or h8. And it's a quiet move, but it takes away all three of those squares nicely. King g7. And b8 through h8 is all covered. So is a7, and black has no good moves to make. They're in zugzwang. So nice problem. Black has to move and give up their queen. White to move, clearly on the attack on the king side. So throwing in h7 check just catches my eye immediately. This almost looks like a dragon sort of position, even though it clearly is not because black has a pawn on c6. So if I play h7 check, I'm just trying to expose that black king. King takes h7, queen takes h5, followed by rook over to h1 should be curtains immediately. So h7 check, king g7, queen takes h5, threatening queen h6 mate. How does black even survive that? Probably pawn to f6 is the only way, but that looks really ugly. Queen h6 check, king to f7, g6 check, followed by g7. White is winning some material. They still have an attack. Maybe it's not as decisive as you would like. The fear, though, if I take on h5 right away, is that black's going to play king h7 and kind of set up a blockade. Rook g1 might still be good there, but I think h7 right away is just so much more appealing. h7, king g7, queen takes h5, f6. I'd really like to kill black there. Maybe rook g1. Rook g1 is looking pretty good. There's also f5 instead of f6 to consider. h7, king g7, queen h5. Let's say f5. f5 might be a better defense. Queen h6, king f7, g6. Yeah, that's got to be winning. I'm not going to pursue that line much further. I just think this is so overwhelming. Yeah, so queen h6. Just double checking here one more time. f5 is better than f6 if black wants to escape, because there's no possibility of white taking on f6, unless I want to do it right now, take en passant. So rook g1 is too slow. Queen h6, king f7, g6. Let's say king e8, g7, take, queen takes. I'm threatening h8 queen, and black's king is stuck. Yeah, let's do that. Oh, incorrect. Bummer. My streak coming to an end once again. Okay, so it's something slower here, huh? It's surprising, because queen h6 just looks so good. Followed by g6, g7. What else could it be? I'm going to try to figure this out. Could it be something to do with bishop takes e7? But I don't see it. Ah, maybe that is it. Bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, queen h6, king to f7, g6 check, but still king e8. Black still escapes. Could it be something slow? Could it be bring the rook over, or maybe knight e2, f4, e6? That looks extremely slow. Albeit probably good for white still. I'm not completely sure. Let's go take a look at this one. Go explore this problem. So queen takes h5, f5. Taking en passant is the correct idea. I don't know why I didn't think about that too much further. I guess I was so focused in on queen h6. So if queen h6 is played, king f7, g6 check, I really just thought this was still winning. If king f6 or king e6, g7 check should just be crushing. Maybe it's not so crushing, though. Here, after all, black is up a rook in the starting position. Here. And even if I take and get another queen, queen takes f8, black's surviving. Yeah, so taking en passant is just more to the point. And however black responds, my rook is getting involved, isn't it? Yeah, that's clearly a better idea. So if king takes f6, then let's just figure this out. Rook f1 should do the trick. Yeah, if king here, there's mate in a couple, like check, king takes h7, rook h1. So probably king to e6, and now queen g4. The d6 square is covered by this bishop, so this bishop does play a role. Rook f5, queen takes f5, mate. So a little sloppy there. I got overconfident. But g takes f6, open up the king, was winning. All right, next problem. There's a lot of firepower coming down on c3. I wonder if I can sacrifice on c3 or sacrifice on a3. Like queen takes a3 looks pretty tempting. Queen takes a3, b takes a3, knight takes c3, check. And then, but he has king b3. King b3 is going to sidestep the discoveries that I wanted. Okay, so what about taking on c3? Knight takes c3, b takes c3, queen takes c3, threatening queen b2, mate, also threatening the rook. Boy, white's going to have a hard time dealing with those threats. Are they not? Because they can guard against the mate, but d2 is going to fall. They could throw the bishop in the way too. Bishop d4, but bishop takes d4, or even rook takes d4, probably better. Looks overwhelming. So right now I'm just deciding between good options. Don't think I want to play rook takes d2 first. Because then after rook takes d2, they're always threatening to take on d8 with check. If I play knight takes c3, b takes c3, queen takes c3, rook takes d7 is not with check, so we have a chance to mate them. And if knight c3, king b3, we have queen a4 mate. If king a1, I think we just take on e2 and we're up a ton of material. What about knight takes c3, b takes c3, queen takes c3, bishop d3, so having the rook defend laterally on b2, probably just rook takes d3. And then after rook takes d3, rook takes d3, we're going to mate them on either b2 or a1, I believe. Yeah, that line checks out. There's also knight takes a3 from the starting position, but I don't think it's that. That doesn't look as forcing as knight takes c3. Knight takes c3 is a check. White really can't ignore that. Okay, let's go for it. Take, set up the mate. Yeah, and now it's important that we have this move. Rook takes d3 and take again, because whichever way white captures... Ooh, actually, you know what? I thought queen a1 was mate right here. That is an imprecision on my part. This is still winning, I think, due to queen a1, queen b1, but I actually just thought queen a1 was checkmate. Let me calculate that again. Queen a1, king b3, queen b1. And if the king goes to a4 or c4, we have queen b5 mate. Lucky, lucky me. Okay, so problem solved for 3 points, but sloppy. When you see so many ideas kind of congealing together, you have a tendency to get overconfident and just want to play something right away. So you always have to fight that instinct in chess. And if you have the time, just spend it looking for the knockout. So lots of pieces converging on c3. That was the big tip-off here. The move that started this problem was d takes c5, which looks like a risky move because all of a sudden the bishop is playing against the pawn. And after this forced line, remember, if white moves the king somewhere, we either mate him or take the queen. So b takes c3, queen takes c3, set up the mate threat. We're setting up an attack on d2. And very important that we didn't throw in a trade of rooks first, right? Because if we had, let's say, played rook takes d2 right off the bat, and then this line, the fly in the ointment is that white can take on d8 with check, which disturbs the sequence. Whereas, after the correct continuation, take here, white does not have time to take on d7. It's not coming with check, so queen b2 is mate. And now white's faced with the threat of mate and also the triple attack on d2. They only have 2 defenders. So I thought about bishop d4 here. Maybe white could try to throw the bishop in the way. Perhaps this is a better defense, because after bishop takes d4, at least rook b1 is not losing immediately. Still looks really nasty for white with their open king. Maybe just bishop takes c5, threatening queen takes a3 mate, and the rook on d2 is winning. But maybe white could consider that defense. As played, though, bishop d3, rook takes d3, just trying to remove a defender. Strip away white's defenses. Take. And if queen takes d3, there's queen b2 mate. And rook takes d3 loses for that same reason, which I should have seen. Next problem. So black can take on e2 right here, but there's also this possibility of queen h3 check. So both sides have some hanging pieces. The rook on d1's attacked twice. If we take on e2, there's just queen takes d1 in reply. So I'm going to look at queen h3 first, because that's kind of the move I would like to play, I think. Queen h3. If king f2, there's queen takes h2 mate. So queen h3, white has to play king h1, don't they? And then what? We have all these discoveries that are possible with the knight, but what's the killer discovery? Knight takes e2, queen takes e1, d1 rather. Knight takes g3, king g1. I don't see a crush there. Looks really good, but I don't see anything decisive. What about just queen h3, king h1, and then just move the rook away somewhere, like rook a1? That way we keep the attack on the rook, and our rook is nice and safe. I think I like that. Queen h3. Yeah, king h1 is forced, rook a1. White has no good checks. And we keep those threats all the same. Must be decisive. Also, white can't attack the rook in a meaningful way. So let's go for this. Now bring the rook over. Quiet move. Okay, and here, what's the easiest way to mate? Just knight takes f3? Yeah, it's going to be... I guess they do have knight d1. Knight d1 as a defense. So knight takes f3 check. Knight d1, knight e1 is kind of funny. Forking the queen and the rook, that wins. The alternative is knight to e2, but what happens after knight d1? Is there some advantage to that? I don't see it. Yeah, I think this one instead. And solved. Just to show how that would have continued. So if knight d1, blocking the check, then I was planning knight e1 with the fork. And white's position is completely collapsing because, let's say queen e2, we can take on either, probably just queen takes g2 or something is easiest. Take, we're up a rook. So nice sequence. The hardest move, I think, is rook a1, finding that quiet move. But once you realize how close white is to losing here, and once you examine knight takes e2 right away or knight takes f3, they're both failing because white can scoop up the rook. Admittedly, black could take on g3, but this is not as decisive as it should be for black. Then you start to realize, well, let's just solve the problem of the hanging rook, and white still has all these problems. And our king is so safe, it doesn't matter. Next problem. Okay, black's king looks perilously close to a mate. The first line I'm looking at, queen b5 check, king d6, knight e4. Pawn takes e4. I'd love to go take the queen, but it's covered by the bishop. Note that we can't use the d7 square because black's knight defends that. Meanwhile, black is threatening some stuff around our king, like rook takes h2, king takes h2, queen h4, mate. So probably everything has to be with check here. Queen b5, king d6. Yeah, knight e4 pawn takes. I'm not seeing it. Not seeing the knockout blow. It's like we need one more piece involved. So there's also queen b5, king d6, queen b4. But then probably c5? C5, knight b5 will win. King c6, rook c7, mate. So on queen b4, black would have to play the king back to c6. And we have a perpetual, but I think clearly we want more. Could even go queen a4 right there. That's kind of funny. Queen a4, king d6, queen a3, king c6, but what have we accomplished? Okay, queen b5, king d6, queen b4, king c6, queen a4, king d6, knight b5 check, king c6, and then rook takes c7 mate. I think that's the line. Queen b5, king d6, queen b4, and again, if c5, there's knight b5, king c6, rook c7 mate. So we're kind of walking the king in order to free up the b5 square for our knight with check. Yeah, I don't see a way out for black, so let's do that. Check. Check again. b5 is not going to change anything, and now this move. And mate. Okay, I like that sequence. It's an attractive one. And everything has to be with check, because, again, black is threatening to take on h2 and checkmate us. Queen h4. So, very important. Yeah, so I was failing at first because of, knight e4 was not working. Knight e4 looks like such a nice move to play, forking the king and the queen. But black just takes it, and the queen is defended by the bishop on e3, so there's nothing. But I was thinking how to coordinate the queen and the knight, because with the queen, knight, and the rook on the 7th rank, all in close proximity to the king, there just must be a mating net. Remember how earlier I was saying that the queen and the knight are a tip-off that, tactical threats are abounding? And that's what we have here. So finding a way to get the knight involved with check without losing the knight was the key, which we're able to do by queen b4 check. If c5, then knight b5, king c6, rook c7. Checkmate is similar. So this is all forced. If pawn b5, we just take. Here, queen c5 mate. Nice problem. going to solve a few more. Knight to c4. This looks like a Benoni position. What's the material? And by the way, on these, I am trying to be conscious of the material balance too. I know I haven't explicitly mentioned that, but... Okay, queen a4 hits the knight and also hits the rook on e8. Those are just two undefended pieces. And if knight takes a3, queen takes e8 comes with check. And black has to block with the bishop, so we can take and not lose our knight on c3. These undefended pieces just stick out like a sore thumb. Always. I like it, so I'm going to do it. Yeah, just scoop up the knight. 8 points for that one. 8 easy rating points on a basic undefended piece problem that over 40% of people have failed, by the way, at this level. So undefended pieces, guys, it's just, this is chess 101. At every level of the game, you have to pay attention to this quite strictly because games just get decided by undefended pieces all the time. So one mini line that I had to check is if knight takes a3, then it's important after queen takes e8 that black has to block with the bishop. Let's say if their pawn was on h5 and they could play king h7, then if I were to take on a3, I would lose the knight on c3. That would be undefended. But because black has to block, I was ready to just take, and the knight is going to be safe. Queen takes d7. Okay. So rook takes e2 is the obvious move, just scooping up the knight. White does not have any good checks, right? Our king is safe for the moment. We could also throw in queen e3, but queen e3, they have queen to d2, blocking the check and adding a defender of e2. So I prefer to avoid that. You know, there's also rook d5. Move the rook and attack the queen, kind of skewer the queen and the rook. Rook d5, let's say the queen moves to, I don't know, e8. Then maybe we're checking on e3, king b1. Looks like they might have back rank issues, but... yeah. So rook d5, queen e8, queen e3 check. And then wherever the king goes, c2 or b1, I think queen to d3 check followed by rook takes d8 at the very least is good. That all makes sense. Rook d5, there's not another annoying move that white can play, right? I'm not saying anything, at least. Yeah, and I don't want to play queen e3 first because of queen d2. Rook takes e2, gets the knight back, but white's going to have some counterplay after take queen d4. So let's go with this. Yeah, queen there. So let's check now. King b1, and now check here is what I was thinking. And I believe white's just going to get mated in this line. If king a1, queen check. There is knight c1. Knight c1. The other thing, though, is we can just take on d8 whenever we want. No. Actually, do not play queen to d1. They can play rook takes d1. And then after rook takes d1, the rook on d8 helps out. It comes back. Okay, so that's, I think, a clear sign that we should just take this. and stop white from playing queen h8. So I almost got too greedy right there. I was able to stop myself before disaster struck, but had we played queen d1 looking for more, then rook takes d1, rook takes d1, and this would be quite a shock to black. Rook takes d1, completely winning for white. So you notice how in these problems I'm always generating a couple candidate moves just right off the bat. I think that's important. I was talking to an IM friend of mine, and he actually says he watches my videos and recommends them to some of his students because he likes the fact that I always talk about a couple candidate moves just immediately upon looking at a position, whether it's in a tactic or in a game that I'm playing. And it's a great habit to get into because you want to have options. And if you can identify the forcing moves and the moves that are at the top of your list right away and just, kind of burn those into your brain and investigate them, that will help you methodically work through the position. So here, queen e3 check and rook takes e2 were the top moves, but neither of those moves seem to be working out. Actually, sorry, right here from the starting position, queen takes d7. Queen e3 was running into queen d2. White scurries back and defends the knight. And rook takes e2, I just didn't like as much because after, say, like this, and then queen check, white is going to get counterplay. Black's king is pretty open. So once I was not satisfied with those, then I looked at secondary moves like rook to d5, which happens to be the best one, skewering the queen and the rook. And then because we check and get our queen to d3 by force, we can scoop up the rook or maybe even go for more against white's king. Or so I thought. Better to scoop up the rook. Okay, let's do 2 more problems and call it a session. Queen g3. White is down a queen, but maybe black has back rank issues. So I'd like to get my rook to e8, but I need to clear some lines in order to do that. So bishop f2 right away makes sense, a retreating move, attacking the queen. And then wherever the queen goes, try to play bishop g4. So let's say bishop f2, queen f4, bishop g4 check. Queen takes g4, rook e8 is going to lead to mate. Bishop f2. If black ever sacrifices their queen for a bishop, we're just going to be up a rook in the resulting position for a couple pawns. Changing the move order, playing bishop g4 right away, I don't think works as well because queen takes, rook e8, king to d7. Black is escaping in that case. Almost has to be bishop f2. There's no other move that is any good here. Yeah, I'm going to do it. And now deliver this check. Also important that if black plays king to b8, then they're not escaping via a7 because our bishop controls that square. So this was a clearance problem, trying to clear some lines for the rooks. The rooks are going to be the heavy hitters here. And as it stands, the bishops on d4 and e2 are just in the way. So we need to move one of them backwards with tempo. Bishop f2, hit the queen, so we can get the other one to g4. And because we're diligent, we would also try bishop g4 right away, as I mentioned. But that's not going to cut it. After takes, rook e8, the king gets to slip out to d7 and attack the rook. Even though the king looks more exposed here, the fact that the rook is under attack is going to cause white to lose steam. So nice one right there. And black's just underdeveloped too. Like the rook on h8 is not involved. Black's knight is not developed. Their queen is under attack, so they can't do much other than move the queen. Giving up the queen would just be too much material. So wherever the queen goes, bishop g4, and we're mating. Okay, last problem. Ooh, I've done this one before. This will not be the last problem because I've solved this one in the past. Actually, last session, I think. Now I got to remember what the answer was. I remember it wasn't my first instinct. I think I remember looking at queen e2 pretty carefully here, but it was not queen e2. I want to say it's bishop takes f3. But if I get this wrong, that would be really embarrassing. Yeah, I want to say it's bishop takes f3. Is it, though? Maybe it is rook e2 now that I think about it. Okay, well, let's approach this independently. And one thing when you've solved a position before or seen something before, you have a tendency just to revert to that knowledge automatically and turn off your brain, but you always have to think in the moment above all else. For all I know, there could be some small twist on this position, and chess.com and their tactics trainers is throwing me a complete curveball. So bishop takes f3, rook takes e8, queen takes e8. Nah, I don't know about that. Queen takes f3 at the very least. And that pawn always threatening to promote is dangerous. So what about rook e2? Rook e2, rook to d8 check, king c6, knight e7 check, king b7. We're getting away. I think that's probably it. Yeah, rook e2. Rook e2, what else? Because that stops queen g3 check. White cannot trade queens. So I like that quite a bit. And our bishop is still monitoring g8, so no reason to panic yet about that. Rook e2, rook d8 check, king c6, knight e7, king b7. We're escaping. No problem. There's some other move I wanted to look at. Rook e2 and then what? Rook f2 maybe? Nah, but it's not going to change much, is it? Just rook takes f2. Yeah, I think it's this move. Problem solved. I only got 1 point, but that's fine because I would have felt weird getting more points about that when I've already solved this in the past. So after rook check, then we can scamper away with our king. King c6. Always our bishop is monitoring g8 again. And we're threatening not only rook takes g2, but also queen h1 or queen g1, followed by queen takes g2. So white has to do something right away. Knight e7, we can go here. Yeah, and taking the bishop is just going to be way too slow. Like take, we're going to mate them soon. Okay, last problem. Black down material, but playing with the initiative. White is trying to escape with their king. What if we play queen h6 check? Then I'm thinking if king c2, we can lure white into a skewer. Bishop to e4. So queen h6 check. If king to c3, then queen takes c1. Picks up the entire rook with check. So I like that. There's no good blocks white has. White can't go to e1, d1. Knight e4 check also comes to mind, but king to c2. Knight takes d6, queen takes d6. Maybe they can survive. Bishop e4 looks pretty dangerous, though. I think queen h6 is cleaner, though. That would be my first instinct right now. King c2, bishop e4. That's too much material, right? Yeah, white's not fighting back from that. And king to c3, queen takes c1 is also a lot of material with an initiative still. Let's go with this one. And now bishop e4. We can't check on c8 because of the knight, so... Okay, so here, yeah. We can just take with the rook because obviously don't want to take with the knight due to rook takes h6. But taking with the rook, after rook d8, we can block. So I should have mentioned that, but we still are capable of blocking on the back rank. Should white play rook d8? I do wonder if knight e4 was also good, though, to start. Knight e4 check. So I think king c2 is virtually forced. And now knight takes d6. Threatening bishop e4. And if queen takes, I was thinking this check puts white in dire straits. Maybe they can somehow hold out in the center, though. King to d2. We can't play rook d8. White's king safety is in serious question, but for the moment, they're not losing. But I think the other line is more to the point. Queen h6 check. And wherever the king goes, yeah, king c3, pick up the rook. King c2, or queen e3 also is running into rook takes e3. So king c2, bishop e4. And I should have mentioned that last detail about being able to block the back rank, but still winning for black. Okay, so I didn't get a perfect score today, but I did solve many problems correctly and increase my rating. So I am happy about the way I solved these problems. A couple of them were a little sloppy, though. I missed certain details. I wish I had that one back where after f5, the solution was g takes f6, taking out passant. For some reason, I just didn't think about that. I was focused on queen to h6 check. But otherwise, not a bad solving session. Some cool problems. I think my favorite one was the bishop and the knight trapping that queen. I thought that was a very elegant problem, with king g7 at the end being the key, taking away the queen's flight squares. All right, so I'll be back again soon with another episode of Climbing the Tactics Training Ladder. We're always working our way forward. And let me know how you guys are doing, too, in the comments. Have you been trying to apply these same solving techniques, these time-honored solving techniques? These are not things that I came up with. These are just practices that I've employed that are time-honored in chess. Taking your time, solving for accuracy, trying to visualize the entire solution in your head, looking at forcing moves, all that good stuff. And hopefully by now we've done many videos of this type. Hopefully you're getting the hang of these and you're seeing improvement in your own tactics. Anyways, I will talk to you guys later. Let me know if you have any questions. All right, bye guys.